Hey guys, we're going to talk all about Game of Thrones' second episode of Season 6, Home. Major spoilers, huge spoilers. If you're still watching this, all right, you've done it.
Because I'm bursting in excitement about this.
Yeah, so they've been warned. Jon Snow, he's back.
Jon Snow. I wore my Stark shirt.
Yes.
Got to represent. This is the moment that we all knew was coming, right? But there was that slight bit of doubt, like, what if we're wrong? I even said that when they were building up the scene that night, I was like, what if nothing does happen and it's the biggest letdown ever, right? I don't know about you, but this was my prediction. Like when I read A Dance of Dragons, yeah. I was tripping up with the name of the episode as well. That was my prediction for how he would be brought back at the time. I was never on board with the idea that he was dead forever. I was like, It makes so much sense. Melisandre's at the wall. He can be brought back. Were you on board with that theory? Did
I mean, and I will say, I guess that's why to me this was fine, but a little lacking in that I think this was the predominant theory, both from people who read the books and hadn't, is, okay, Jon is dead. He is a corpse, but who is there who might be able to resurrect someone, you know? And so I think the fact that it all happened exactly as most of us figured it would happen, to me is a little disappointing. I wish there was some swerve on it, even though not only did I think Jon was going to come back, I think he had to come back. I think dramatically it would have been a bad idea for this death to stick, in that it really would have sort of cut off a lot of story. But, you know, you and I talked about the fact we were predicting when he'd come back, and you thought it was sooner than I did. I thought, maybe it's the end of this season.
I thought it was going to be the middle. I did not expect that it would be the second episode.
Yeah.
Which has me excited, but I want to touch upon your point for a second. I have two thoughts about how they handled it. First and foremost, I thought, as great as Davos's pep talk was, I thought it was the easiest way to get around to the point where Melisandre is forced to bring him back.
Right.
I thought they would build that up a little bit more. That being said, as someone who firmly, staunchly believed that this was how they'd bring him back, I thought that they did a really good job with that sequence, because I had my doubt. I was like, even as I was waiting for him to take his breath and open his eyes, I was like, are they not going to do it? And I think that the fact that I felt that doubt sold that scene for me, because it's something that is really hard to be surprising, as much as they tried to make it surprising. And the fact that I for a moment was like, maybe I was wrong. Maybe this was just their big slap on the wrist for saying, this is what you thought for so long and you were wrong about it. That got me on board with it.
See, it's funny. To me, I thought it'd be more interesting if it didn't work. Again, thinking eventually he's going to come back. But I thought, okay, this won't work. And maybe as they did all the close-ups on the direwolf, I kept thinking there'll be some setup for his return here, but it will not work. So him opening his eyes, I don't know. To me, it was a little, on a show that is not usually you can predict what's going to happen. It's kind of yep, that's kind of what we thought was going to happen. Wasn't bad to me, but I thought I wish there was something a little more interesting to it. And I do think they should have held off longer and sort of seen what goes on without Jon there, for a while longer, and maybe use his return as a bigger surprise in an episode than the way it played out. Because, I mean, some of this is a little outside the show. It's not the show's fault that, the fact that for a year now it's just been speculation, and everyone...
Of which we are super guilty of.
And everyone, which we are also part of, is asking everyone involved in the show about it, you know? That is not the show itself, right? So part of that is kind of a problem that just exists in the world the show exists, airs in.
I sort of felt that way too for a while. I mean, beyond the show dealing with it for a year, it's been 5 years since A Dance with Dragons came out. And because of that, I always sort of had the concern that it was going to be a letdown no matter what. If they bring him back the way we all guessed, is that a letdown? Yeah. If he doesn't come back, that's a letdown. I was not expecting him to come back so early, but I legitimately am really excited that we now get 8 episodes with Jon Snow. And our colleague Joshua Yale wrote a really interesting piece about how, George R. R. Martin has laid the groundwork of resurrection really having an impact on characters.
Right.
And maybe Game of Thrones skips over that and he's the same, but I don't think he will be, because we saw with Beric Dondarrion, he was a character who was very changed by being brought back to life. And I have a feeling we're going to see a different Jon Snow, and a Jon Snow who now is severed of his ties with the Night's Watch. We might find out who his parents are in the near future, which could be its whole big storyline on
Yep.
its own. I'm really excited to see what they do next with him.
I think it should be, and I think it will be, that he's different, right? He can't just be like, okay, I'm back, guys.
Yeah.
You know, same
cool.
old Jon Snow. There has to be, I think, and like Terry said, Joshua wrote this interesting piece that used some quotes from Martin about his thoughts on, it has to affect you, right? It has to be, there's a change to him. So I think it will be interesting to see, because Jon Snow is sort of the paragon of virtue on this show, and a show that doesn't have traditional heroes or they've died like Ned. He is still that character, so will he maybe be not that character anymore?
And
you know?
I can't wait for like the mic drop moment of when the Night's Watch finds out he's still alive. If you watch like the promo for next week's episode, I think you get a little taste of like the reaction on people's faces, but I just can't wait to see, God, is he gonna kill Ollie? Will Ollie finally die? Will this be the new moment we're waiting for when they can just kill off that little traitor?
Game of Thrones is so good at getting us to root for kids to get killed.
I know, God, which speaking of which, right?
It does that. So those are our thoughts on Jon Snow's return. I wish it had been handled a little differently.
I was pretty happy with it.
Terry's pretty happy with it. What did you think? Let us know in the comments. But also, what do you think going forward now? Will it be business as usual for Jon, with a few new stab wounds, or how changed might he be going forward? So let us talk about it. Moving over to other kid killing in Game of Thrones.
Just business as usual.
Let's talk about the Boltons. And I did not see this coming.
I did not see it coming.
Certainly not yet.
And it was really funny because I went back and I looked at this interview I'd done with Michael McElligton, who plays Roose, and Ewan Rion, who plays Ramsay. And I just asked them, like, hey, do you think they'd ever turn against each other? And they were like a little weird. They were like, I don't know, like they probably both would turn on each other. And little did I know, like a week later, I would be watching this episode when Ramsay kills his father.
Yeah, because I interviewed them too, like 2 days before you at the premiere, and I was joking earlier, like, how many of the people did we interview going into the season that'll be dead super quickly, And we're like, did a very good job of talking about the new season that they're not really a huge part of. When that was all happening, when Ramsay learned that, that Roose's wife had given birth, and now, of course, this is a threat to the throne for him, especially because he lost Sansa. And so I'm like, okay, well, this is going to make Ramsay scramble. This is going to make Ramsay move. I did not expect, I'm just going to pull out a knife right now.
And in a way very similar to how Roose betrayed Robb at the Red Wedding. I think there's like very intentional imagery that's similar to that scene. I will say, like, it's so great to be surprised by Game of Thrones, to have these moments, and like crazy that wasn't even the biggest moment of that episode. It's not even the only like kinslaying in that episode, but still, like, I think that's going to be a really big deal and really, push Ramsay forward in this season. We see him as sort of now the lone villain. If you think, like, there are the White Walkers, but then there's Ramsay, and
as
he's
far as
the
a
only big threat.
Character goes,
So I'm really intrigued to see how he rises up, and he has the Karstarks on his side. Like, remember the Karstarks?
Right. It's always funny when the previously on includes something from like 5 years ago. Because Ramsay, right now, because the war that was such a big part of the show for the first like 2 or 3 seasons is kind of done. But, the Boltons had kind of come out sort of on top in a lot of ways, or certainly one of the only ones that sort of have their power, have their legions behind them, have amassed new land. So Ramsay being in charge is a big deal because, of course, it's bad news. Not that his dad was much better, but he's such a psychopath, Ramsay.
He is that mad dog that Roose called him.
Who has many mad dogs with which he will use to kill babies, who are his brother. More kinslaying. So it's going to be interesting because, Ramsay, you need a character to hate. And, like, the White Walkers are cool and scary, and the Night's King looks cool and badass, but he's not a character that is having monologues. Ramsay gives us focus, I
am very intrigued to see, like, Walder Bolton had this really sad death. I was like, this is like some cruelty that this poor character has not deserved. And I get that that's a lot of what Game of Thrones is, but that was like a very violent end. But Walder Frey is not a man who likes it when his family is killed, when people turn on him. I'm curious to see if we see any repercussions with him against Ramsay when he finds out that his daughter has been killed.
Yeah, and Walder Frey is, of course, a huge loose end of the show because he was so pivotal in the Red Wedding, which was such a monumental moment for the show. okay, Roose has been dealt with, but Walder Frey's still out there. But again, on a show where allegiances shift and people turn on each other all the time. To have Walder Frey, who's a pretty despicable character in his own right, but yeah, maybe he could be an enemy now of Ramses.
Yeah, though.
I don't know
Could you imagine if he allied himself with Sansa?
Right. There you go.
She'll be the Lady Stoneheart we need in that situation.
Meet your new partner.
Yeah.
Well, let's kind of shift a little bit there, but talk about the unlikely alliance thing, because you mentioned the Karstarks coming back, and again, it is one of those things where, if you don't really remember the show, I don't blame people for being like, wait, who? And they had to show that previously on to remind you that Bran, I'm sorry, not Bran, that'd be
Robb.
a whole other thing. Robb Stark in season 2 had Lord Karstark killed. Was doing the Ned and Robb thing of doing what's right, which will get you killed.
Right.
And had him executed, and now we're seeing years later the fallout
more
from
fallout
this,
from it, yeah.
because the Karstarks have aligned themselves with the Boltons purely sort of because of the sort of motivation of, well, we hate the Starks, for what they did. Was that Lord Karstark's son?
Yes.
I do think it's kind of funny that he'd be like, you killed my father, thus I must stop you, and then it's totally cool with Ramsay killing his dad. He's like, well, that's not my dad.
But the Karstarks also sort of suck, so that doesn't surprise me. I'm like, these characters, their like one through line really has been that they're the worst. So it totally makes sense for me. I did think it was interesting that they would try and bring back a recognizable name, and I think it is because we're building up towards this big battle in the north. We've seen it promoted so heavily.
Yeah.
We've seen houses like House Mormont be a part of it. I bet we're going to see some of the Umbers come into play. I bet there are going to be these other big houses in the north that maybe don't mean too much to you if you're just a casual fan of the show, but will be enough to like tickle fans of the books who are like, oh yeah, the Karstarks, the Mormonts, the Umbers. And I think that they're sort of setting up this big alliance versus alliance that will see these houses clash as part of this battle.
I just know that Matt Fowler, who reviews the show for us, is hoping for House Fowler to rise up, because that is an actual house.
There is a House Fowler.
They've never really done anything, but
also,
they exist out there.
Speaking of unlikely alliances, like the Wildlings coming back to the Wall and siding with Ed and with Davos. I mean, that was sort of my gut instinct at what would happen there, but it was a really cool moment. And for us to be cheering for the Wildlings against the Night's Watch is just such a way for Game of Thrones to spin things on its head.
Stuff.
It's like the Jaime Lannister thing all over again.
But also it was a notable moment, I'd say, 2 episodes in a row, because Game of Thrones is often about misery and despair. So when you get those moments, and in the first episode it was Brienne to the rescue, and here getting the Wildlings to the rescue, it's great to have those minimal moments that they are on Game of Thrones, but just a pure yes, here they are.
Tyrion got a good one too when he was with the dragons and is now a dragon tamer. Talk about not just a fan service moment, but like a huge moment for Tyrion. This is like what he's wanted his whole life, and he was right. Even though, as he told Varys, hit him in the face next time he tries an idea as stupid as that, he was right, and that worked.
And I love how he's like, I'm totally buddies with Daenerys. Yeah. we're cool.
Your mom and I are great friends.
Right. I know she's never mentioned me, but we're cool. And then there was more sort of sentimental sort of connections here. Well, one was interesting, which was Davos and Melisandre, simply because, for years, Davos has not been happy with her being around, and yet he is the one who helps her get her groove back, who gives her that.
Speaking of loose ends, though, we as the audience know that she is the one who killed Shireen. Good storytelling dictates that comes out at some point.
Yeah.
And after they're building up their relationship like this, I'm really interested to see if and when that does come out, that is a huge hit to them. And that's a moment, the more we see them getting closer, the more I can't wait for it to come out, because I think it's going to be a really interesting character moment for 2 characters who are now getting better development than they've ever had before. Yeah,
and kind of the sort of not flip side, but almost a different version of that is Sansa and Theon, because there everything is laid out. In fact, the dialogue was kind of interesting because they made sure to address all the horrible stuff Theon's done, because Sansa knows that. So there is no secret to be revealed. She already knew. She hated him because of those things he did. And so that was a really great moment, I thought, when their sort of big embrace and goodbye, that they could that the show could earn that, you know, to have Theon. And I thought this was a great thing in the books too, the redemption of Theon, which you could think would never happen based on what he did. But I think they did get to that moment, and you felt
He's been through
emotional.
hell and back, literally.
He's been from hell and back. He's sacrificed a penis.
Yeah, yeah.
No, I thought it was really sweet to see that happen, though.
And fans finally can get it off their chests. Sansa knows that Arya's alive. She
Yes.
asks Brienne.
Yeah.
Important moment. Will we ever see those two characters together again? Probably not. It's Game of Thrones. Do I want it to happen with like
Yeah.
every fiber of my being? Of course I do. So
At least she
we'll
knows.
see. Yeah.
But yeah, with Theon and Sansa, I mean, it's easy, because even in the books and in the show, it's easy to kind of forget that in the backstory that they were supposed to have been raised almost like siblings.
Yeah.
So to have that, that connection, the fact that she was going to vouch for him and make sure he was protected, it said so much about everything they've gone through, So let us know in the comments, what do you think about all these unlikely alliances that are happening on Game of Thrones? And do you think they've earned this? We do. But let us know. And are there others you'd like to see happen? Characters you just never think would, be on the same side. Walder Frey and anyone, I guess. But, any others, let us know as well. We see where they go on that. Let us talk about another area that we returned to this season. Again, stuff from the past of the show that, some people might have forgotten about to some extent. But, I think Yara, she's made enough of an impression, but we hadn't seen that much of Balon Greyjoy until
It's
now.
funny. I had a chance to talk to both Gemma Whalen, who plays Yara, and Patrick Malahide, who plays Balon. And I was talking to him, he's like, we're never going to get a moment where Balon and Theon are able to put, their issues behind them. He hasn't seen him in a while. And Patrick goes, well, he saw part of him. I was like, but it really, I think that was one of the last major scenes, like when they got Theon's penis in the mail, and then when Yara
gram.
went to go save Theon, but he was so far into being Reek that he wouldn't leave with her. Like those are the last big things we saw with these characters, and it's been a while since we really got to deal with any of that.
Yeah.
Do you think they did a good job picking it sort of back up?
I think they did the best they could. I mean, with the Balon stuff seemed very accelerated because he literally is like, I'm back, I'm grumpy, I'm dead. And I almost wish, it's one of those things where like I kind of maybe wish we'd seen him for a couple more episodes before they killed him off.
Listen, he was on borrowed time anyway.
He was on borrowed time. I think Yara, we've seen her enough to have an investment in her though, certainly. But it is interesting, because look, the books went a little crazy. I'm one of those people who's critical of the 4th and 5th book as far as like so many new characters introduced in what's already a very dense story. The show is scaled back extremely, a lot.
They don't even name the Aaron Greyjoy, the damp hair. Like,
right.
He's just a character there who you might know who he is if you know who that's supposed to be.
Right. But I think we're still we're gonna get to know his world a lot more here. The fact that Theon is now heading back home will hopefully
Really
make it.
interesting.
This is Game of Thrones. People don't always get where they're trying to get, but I think he will. I think just the fact that we're bringing in so many of his family members at this point. And now the idea, a word, Kingsmoot, introduced.
Kingsmoot! Kingsmoot hype!
Which, I think if you haven't read the books, it's clear you can tell, okay, this is going to be sort of how they make the decision on who the next leader is, and that there are now a lot of different people in play, especially the fact that we know Theon's coming back home, which no one else knows at this point.
My one concern is like we're seeing so much emphasis put on this. Will it have payoff? Will the Ironborn actually be important to it? Obviously, Euron's storyline is important in a sort of unexpected way in the book that they're setting up in the show, which I'm being intentionally vague, but there's a way it could go in that direction. But with Theon coming back, I'm like very intrigued how he could be brought into the mix. And I asked Gemma Whalen this, I was like, is this going to be important? Is it going to have larger resonance within the season? And she said that she couldn't say, but why they wouldn't put this much emphasis on it without it being important in some way. I'm just worried about another Dorne situation that they did put so much emphasis on, and it was a bit of a mess.
I'm also, by the way, they didn't even go there this week, but I'm concerned with the Dothraki stuff right now, which obviously was important early on in the show, but do we need to go back?
Right, to Vice Dothrak.
And especially, right now, because I think this episode, and, we're coming out of a couple of weeks where Benioff and Weiss have been quoted more and more talking about how they're aiming towards the end and how there's 10 to 15 episodes left after the current season. We're in the final act of Game of Thrones, basically.
Feels very accelerated.
And it really feels accelerated. Stuff like Roose being killed, Jon returning, it feels like setting up the ending stuff. And that's why it is a concern, and this is why in the books I think it went a little too far with like, okay, we're going to introduce a bunch of new stuff. So I do hope, because again, Theon's been an important character since the beginning, but how much of his world do we need to see beyond it being interesting, but you want it to have significance?
Let's be honest, we're probably jumping straight to the King's Moot. Like, I don't think that there's going to be a lot of politicking and stuff like that. I don't think there's going to be a lot of campaigning with the various contenders. I have a feeling they're going to call the King's Moot. Euron is going to show up. Yara is going to be surprised. She already has sworn revenge on whoever killed her father, which is crazy because in the books, they leave that up to interpretation.
Yeah.
People interpret it as being that Euron went and killed Balon up, on the bridge, but we never see it. So for us to see that now, I thought was an interesting choice and probably directly tied to Yara's revenge statement.
Yeah, I think you're right. It'll be accelerated because whoever is the leader, we will then see it kind of, okay, what will be their role now as we head towards the end of this show, which I know is still probably 2 years away, but still in the grand scheme of things, heading towards the end, and who will this new leader side with, obviously.
What did you think of Euron Greyjoy? He had one big scene in this episode.
He is another bad family member. Hard to say, except that, look, it is funny on Game of Thrones how many people just are like, it's a funny thing on Game of Thrones. Either people are despicable to their family members or too close to their family members. But yeah, he's obviously a sort of younger, more virile. He kind of even he called his brother Old Man, which on this show makes sense because people have so many siblings and all these kings who had kids for 20 years.
Right.
I have a feeling, we have these strong personalities with Yara and him, so I am most curious to see them sort of clash. A clash of kings? To see how they clash and how Theon will play into it all, because Theon is not
he does. We're sort of assuming, right, yeah.
If he makes it back there, because Theon is a redeemed character, but he's not a strong.
He's far from being an Ironborn as he can at this point.
Right, and so I think the most he can hope for at this point is Yara sort of protecting him, since she did try to save him. So I don't really have a big read on Euron yet.
I really liked what I saw of him. He was a character who I was excited to see introduced. Still a lot of unknowns in the books, and I think him being a mystery there really sort of hyped my anticipation of him here. But I thought the actor played him, Palau Eisbach, which I'm probably butchering that pronunciation, but I thought he really nailed it, and they did a good job underlining, you went crazy in the storm, and he's like, I am the storm. I saw some debate in the comments, was it cheesy or was it epic? I lean more on the side of epic, but I hope they don't introduce this character just to have them do nothing like Prince Doran and Arya Hota over Dorne.
Yeah, but again, it's even though Benioff and Weiss are playing things very close to the vest right now, and I just we talked about last week, I think they heard the complaints about Dorne.
Yeah.
And so I would hope that, they're kind of taking that all into account as all this stuff is developing. So let's talk a bit more about, let's talk about the flashback stuff with Bran, which will delve into book stuff. And again, this is where we have to give a weird pseudo warning in that, again, we're going to talk about stuff that, is a little bit from the books that we haven't seen, but more about speculation that has now given rise to.
So if you don't want to speculate with us, this is your warning.
You don't want to speculate. If you don't want to know a little bit more about the backstory that the books have delved into, that the show is now delving into, and then huge speculation, but you probably heard some of the speculation. That was
a good warning.
Yeah, thank you. It was a weird warning. It's so weird trying to warn about this stuff. Bran is back, first of all, we should mention, of course, after 2 years away.
Yeah.
Much taller. And we're seeing his sort of increased powers. And we got to see very directly him.
www.werewood.net.
Yes. He got to travel into his own family's history and sort of give us we got a little glimpse of young Ned Stark.
And young Lyanna Stark.
Lyanna Stark.
I feel like I've been waiting my whole life, even though I haven't been reading these books my whole life, to see Lyanna Stark in action.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which was really cool. She's like this strong character, comes in on horseback, doesn't take any crap from her brothers. Let's talk about that and all of the speculation about Lyanna and what her significance to the story is.
They have maybe 3 or 4 times mentioned Lyanna Stark throughout Game of Thrones. And she is someone, because of all the speculation that's gone on with the books, has been raised up to a pillar of important character with a capital I, a capital C. So I think for them to show her here, especially when we know we're getting more flashbacks next week, think is very intentional. A very good way to show her or remind people who she is. And Bran even says, you know, oh, I saw her in the crypts below the castle. There was that great scene last season between Littlefinger and Sansa when he talked a little bit about what happened with her, what happened with Rhaegar Targaryen, also important character with capital letters. And in that brief moment where he was like, there might be more to this story than you think, young Sansa.
Yeah. So brief recap here in the backstory is that she was supposed to marry Robert, as in Cersei's husband Robert, but she was
King Robert,
but she was taken
by Rhaegar
Targaryen. And then people have different depictions of what happened. Did he take her and rape her and was horrible to her? Or did they fall in love with each other?
But this was a huge moment that sparked Robert's rebellion, which did everything that since happened.
All the backstory, all the stuff we hear about so much.
It all sort of converges upon this moment and these two characters and the why. So I think I would be very surprised if we don't get the story of what actually happened between Rhaegar and Lyanna this season. Maybe even as early as next episode.
Yeah. Well, let's talk. I mean, there's no reason not to talk about the theory that's been on for years about the fan theory, which is that Lyanna and Rhaegar are Jon Snow's parents.
Yes.
This is the prevailing fan theory, going back to the fact that no one's ever thought that the fact that Ned is Jon's dad never really seemed to be the truth, especially just the fact that Ned cheating on Kat didn't seem to be the truth.
Yeah.
And that, this is really his sister's son that he is protected the identity of. And it seems pretty significant to me that we got this flashback. We saw this character for the first time, almost bookended the episode that Jon came back to life in.
Yeah, and it's important what his parentage is, because if he is half Targaryen, then he has a claim to the throne. He might have these other abilities. Like the big speculation was that Ned wouldn't say that he was Rhaegar's son because Robert had such bloodlust about it, and if he knew that Lyanna had sired a child with Rhaegar, that he would probably try and have him killed, or he would be a target from anyone else, either trying to put a Targaryen back on the throne like Daenerys, or trying to kill him. So it definitely makes sense, and it also does seem like such important endgame material with when again Jon's ties to the Night's Watch have been severed. Like his watch has ended and he's now back to life. Where does he stand now? It will be interesting if that detail is revealed to we the audience. At what point does it get revealed to Jon?
Right.
Is that something Bran has to tell him? Is that something that another character would know, which I don't think they would. I think everyone who knows would be dead.
In the books, there was
Howland Reed.
There was is that his name? There was there was someone with Ned.
Yeah, it was Howland Reed, who is Mira and Jojen's father.
Right.
And Mira is obviously still alive and with Bran. And
this is I know this is for Game of Thrones. The fact that it is a very dense story. It's like there's so much little connections, but
It's going to be crazy, though, if that is what is revealed, and people really, like, a lot of the promos seem to be hinting at this Tower of Joy scene, which is pivotal to this whole backstory.
That's where Ned tried to go rescue her.
Right, that's where he found her in her bed of blood, which was, I think, within the first 100 pages of Game of Thrones mentioned, and people were like, bed of blood, isn't that like a birthing bed? Oh, okay, and that's where the speculation was born. But it's going to be so crazy. People have been thinking about this literally since when the first Game of Thrones book came out, in the 90s.
Yep.
If we get that answer on the show next week, like that's a huge moment. I don't know if I'm ready for that.
No, you're right. It's like a 23-year in the making, you know, reveal that again is strange if the TV show reveals it before the books get to it, but that is where we're at right now.
And it's interesting because like this all started sort of talking about Bran, but I feel like this is why I'm so excited about Bran's storyline this season is because Game of Thrones and David and Dan, the showrunners, talked about this in the Inside the Episode for this week. They're very against flashbacks, but when they were able to find a way for us to experience that with a character and learn those reveals with a character, that's when they sort of became okay with introducing flashbacks into the DNA of Game of Thrones. And I think like it's going to be really cool to hopefully see some other big scenes, but also this one through Bran's eyes.
I think it's very smart too, because it would be sort of a bad way to deliver this information to have it all be exposition and have someone give a speech and explain it all. Way better. It's a TV show to actually show it, and it's nice because it's connective tissue. And Ned Stark is a character we knew and loved when the show began. So, hey, that's young Ned, you know, and to get all those connections. Hey, it even reminds us of Benjen Stark, who is still a character that a lot of probably people watching the shows have even forgotten. Yeah, it's like, where the hell is Benjen Stark? He exists. So I think it's a great way to use the show to give flashbacks in a way that's still part of the narrative.
I am really intrigued too. I wonder if the fact that they've been so heavily teasing this maybe Tower of Joy scene, if it's a red herring, if we're going to get something even bigger in the flashbacks. We know that Bran and the Three-Eyed Raven are sort of back there together experiencing these things, but we've also seen in the promos the shot where the Night's King shows up and sort of grabs Bran's arm, and they can see each other in what I'm assuming is one of these visions.
Because he's walking.
Right. Yeah. Maybe we get some context for that. Maybe we find out who the Night's King is, and this is something that Isaac Hempstead Wright teased to us a little bit. Maybe we find out what the connection between the Three-Eyed Raven and the Night's King is, which is crazy lore stuff, but could be hugely pivotal to us building up to this final battle against the White Walkers.
Yeah, we've talked about, for a lot of years, a lot of fans have talked about the fact that Bran would end up being very important, and I think this is all going to come into play here. He'll be important both to deliver us important information as viewers, but also I think maybe, whether it's even just directly telling people what he knows, but also seeing how his powers can sort of affect things and all the characters it might bring together in different ways.
And Mira even said, or one of the Children of the Forest said to Mira that Bran won't stay at the Weirwood with the Three-Eyed Raven forever, which is our reminder, this isn't where he's ending up. This is just where he is now and where we can get these amazing flashbacks that we've been waiting for forever.
Yeah.
So I wonder if that's even setting up that Bran might leave and go off to wherever the next part of his journey is before the end of this season.
And Hodor was Willis.
And Hodor was Willis for bearing the lead. As important a reveal as Jon Snow being back. I'm so intrigued. I have no idea what could have happened to him to make him lose his voice, but clearly something traumatic, something big and major happened to him to bring him to this point.
And I wonder if this might not be in the books at all. I mean, the books that haven't come out, but maybe in the show they'll kind of put all that together.
Yeah.
Maybe he'll be hurt when Lyanna's taken or something like that. We shall see. So yeah, that is it for us talking about Game of Thrones this week. I mean, this is a huge episode. We didn't even talk about Arya and
Cersei,
being
Jaime.
the fact that there are giant people smashing people's heads into walls left and right.
Lots of head smashing in this episode. Lots of head smashing.
Yeah, so because that's Game of Thrones gives us so much. So please let us know in the comments. All the stuff we talked about. Please let us know your thoughts, but also some of these other plot lines, what really stuck out to you, and for plenty more on Game of Thrones, keep it here at IGN.